Hello friends, Raymond and I are wrapping up our most recent series today, Gear for Beginner Photographers. We talked about fixed lens cameras, DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, film cameras, and along the way we had so many questions about lenses that we decided to add today's video to the series. Today we talk about lenses you might purchase after you have that initial camera body and kit lens. I'll provide some recommendations for those of you that know you want to expand beyond your kit lens, but you aren't quite sure what to purchase. I have three-ish recommendations for you today. They will be all types of lenses that all brands offer. You'll be able to find these no matter the camera you have. Also, you may have seen in our video earlier this week that Raymond was out of town. He's back in town now, but I can't get him out of the pool today to film this video. He says it's his day off. So we're going to visit him at some point for his best advice for you. Many of us have a budget when it comes to our photography gear, and there is one surefire way to save money on lenses. That is to purchase used from a trusted source. I want to thank my trusted source for purchasing used gear, KEH, for sponsoring this portion of the video. KEH is the original re-commerce company, meaning they buy and sell used gear. I was a customer of KEH even before I started working with them, and I continue to go to them to not only purchase used gear, but to sell my gear as well. They have quite the variety of gear in stock: bodies, lenses, tripods, lighting, bags. No matter what you're shopping for, one thing that I love about KEH is their clear grading system and the knowledge that they have thoroughly tested the gear prior to selling it to me. I do have affiliate links for you in the description of this video. Using those links to get to KEH helps KEH know to continue supporting this channel. I also have special codes for you in the description that give you a discount on the purchase of gear and a bonus on the sale of your gear. I also receive a small commission, which in combination with this KEH sponsorship helps me continue releasing projects like this video series. So thank you to those of you that use those links, and thank you to KEH for continuing to partner with this channel. A quick note before we get started. If you get lost in the terminology as we are working our way through these recommendations, that's a good indication that you should pause. Don't purchase a lens yet. You should solidify your photography knowledge and then come back to the idea of your next purchase. You're spending your hard-earned money on this gear. You should know what you're purchasing and what you will gain with it. I have a free course on the basics of photography. It will take you through everything: gear, concepts, editing, and more. You will absolutely come out of that course understanding all of the terminology we will discuss in this video. I will link to the course in the description of this video. Now, onto the lenses. My first recommendation is a prime lens. I already mentioned that my assumption is that you already have a camera body and a kit lens. That kit lens is probably a mid-range zoom with a variable aperture. Even if your kit lens is a mid-range zoom with a constant aperture, this advice applies. Of any lens that you could purchase, you will probably see the largest difference in using the lens and with the results with a prime lens. Prime lenses are often going to provide very crisp results, and they can almost always open up to wide apertures. That wide aperture will allow you to start exploring a shallow depth of field and low light photography at a relatively low cost, especially if you're looking at used lenses. The expanded depth of field options and low light capability will be noticeably better as compared to your kit lens. A simple test for you to see the difference is to walk around your home and photograph your family as they go about their day. First do it with the kit lens, and then do it with the prime lens. You'll see that with the wider aperture, you'll be isolating your subject amongst your home surroundings with a shallow depth of field. And you'll also be able to achieve faster shutter speeds and lower ISO sensitivity settings. That, in combination with the clarity of a prime lens, will provide you with more crisp results with less noise. Another benefit of a prime lens for a beginner is that it will challenge you to compose differently because you don't have the luxury of zooming. I love prime lenses, and I can't say enough about how they can assist you in your photography journey. I hesitate to say this because there are always exceptions, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you can't achieve a crisp image or a beautiful result with a prime lens, it's not your gear that's lacking. You need to look at your skill, both in operating your camera and in things like composition. If you want to experience this challenge, you can take that same test I mentioned a moment ago, where you walk around your home with your kit lens, which zooms, and then with the prime lens. Notice how you have to do things differently to achieve a result that you enjoy. You'll be changing where you stand, or if you crouch down, or if you want to stand up on a chair. It'll actually be fun. As for which prime lens in particular, every brand has a variety. For focal length, you could go with anything really. I suggest thinking about where you typically shoot the zoom lens that you currently have. Do you keep it wide? Do you often zoom all the way in and wish for a little more zoom? Two very popular focal lengths to try are 35 and 50 millimeters. If you just like to walk around with your camera and capture the world around you, I often recommend these focal lengths or their equivalents for APS-C cameras. 50 millimeters is right around what we see naturally with our eyes, and 35 millimeters, of course, is a bit wider than that. Raymond's and my collection of cameras back here is ever evolving, but one thing remains the same. We always have at least one of each in our collection, and I'd grab either for a day of photography. I actually tend to go back and forth between which I like better. If you aren't sure which focal length you'd prefer, I can point you to the exercise we've already mentioned twice. Walk around your home with your kit lens, capture your family or your favorite treasures around the home, or even take a walk around your neighborhood and capture what's around you. At what point in your zoom range do you find yourself coming back to? Like I said, every brand has a variety of prime lenses. If you notice that you like to capture wide angle images, maybe a 24 millimeter equivalent prime lens would be good for you. Or if you find that you're always zooming in and wishing for a bit more, take a look at an 85 millimeter. Beyond focal length, when looking at prime lenses, you will see variations in aperture capability. I have a 50 millimeter prime lens that opens up super wide to f1.1. You might see f1.2 or f1.4, maybe even f2.8. An f1.8 prime lens is often a sweet spot between capability and cost, but don't shy away from a lens if its widest aperture is f2 or f2.8. My point is that you don't need to spend the extra money on an f1.4 prime lens at this point, and you may never even find the need for it. Moving on from prime lenses, my second recommendation is a new mid-range zoom with either a wider constant aperture or with an expanded zoom range. Those are two slightly different types of lenses for two slightly different needs. If you are using your kit lens, maybe around the house like I've suggested, and you're finding that you wish you could shoot a bit easier in low light situations, or you'd like to be able to achieve shallower depths of field to isolate your subject, take a look at a constant aperture zoom lens. Many brands offer mid-range zoom with a constant aperture of f2.8, and that means that you can use f2.8, which is a relatively wide aperture, at all of the focal lengths in the range. The benefits there are low light capability and expanded depth of field effects. For full-frame cameras, those lenses will most often be a 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8. Pretty much every brand that makes full-frame bodies offers that lens. For APS-C cameras, not every brand offers an f2.8 mid-range zoom, but a few do. Sony and Fujifilm both offer a 16 to 55 millimeter f2.8, and Nikon offers a 17 to 55 millimeter f2.8 for their DSLRs. You can also find these types of lenses for different lens mounts from independent lens manufacturers like Sigma. Now, if you like your kit lens, but you wish it could zoom more, there are lenses available from most brands that offer an expanded range. You may see a slightly expanded range, say to 105 millimeters, like this Sony 24 to 105 millimeter f4 or this Nikon 24 to 120 f4. Most brands have something like this. The options I just mentioned were for full frame bodies. Unfortunately, not many brands offer this type of lens for APS-C bodies. I do know that Sony offers an 18 to 105 millimeter f4, and Fujifilm actually has a couple of options, including a 16 to 80 millimeter f4. These lenses, whether full frame or APS-C, often offer clarity, and the available aperture of f4 actually provides you with a relatively shallow depth of field at the longer focal lengths. This type of lens is very popular among even experienced photographers because of the balance of image quality and flexibility. There are lenses that are usually called all-in-one lenses that offer a much more expanded range of focal lengths. For full frame, that would look like a 24 to 240 millimeter, and for APS-C, it could be a range of roughly 18 to 200. They will have variable apertures of something like f3.5 to 5.6 or maybe to f6.3. The big benefit of these lenses is flexibility in terms of focal lengths. You can keep this one lens on your camera and capture wide-angle landscapes one moment, and then the next moment you can zoom way in to photograph a bird in a nearby tree. That is quite enticing, and a lot of photographers, beginners especially, love this option. We had an 18 to 200 for our Nikon APS-C DSLRs that we used quite often for a long time. We gifted it to a friend just a few years ago as he had just purchased his first Nikon DSLR and was getting into photography. So you have flexibility in focal lengths, but there are trade-offs for that flexibility. Because there is so much glass in the lens to allow for all of that zoom, you will compromise image quality. Your photos won't be as crisp as you would see with a shorter range zoom lens, like a 24 to 70. You will also notice that these lenses are variable aperture, meaning that the widest available aperture on the long end, when you're zoomed all the way in, may be relatively narrow, maybe f6.3. And that simply means that you are sacrificing some low light capability. All of that being said, don't let these trade-offs scare you. If you understand what you're getting, by all means go for it. Like I said, many photographers love these lenses. My last recommendation is a telephoto lens. This recommendation is for those of you that see things that are far away and you think, man, I want to capture that up close. There are many, many options when it comes to telephoto, and they can get very pricey. My recommendation as a first telephoto lens is either one of the all-in-one lenses that I mentioned just a moment ago, where you can zoom up to 200 millimeters or more, or this second option is geared towards those of you using an APS-C camera body. Many brands offer camera bodies in a kit. When you purchased your camera body, you probably purchased it with a lens in a kit. However, many offer a two-lens kit with their APS-C bodies, where you receive the mid-range zoom and a telephoto zoom. You can also purchase these telephoto zoom lenses separately outside of the kit. This telephoto zoom will be something like a 55 to 200 or a 70 to 200, and it will have a variable aperture like f3.5 to f5.6 or f3.5 to f6.3. These are a wonderful way to get started with telephoto photography. You will likely see improved image quality in one of these lenses as compared to an all-in-one lens though. Of course, if you do want higher image quality or a wider aperture or a longer focal length, there are plentiful options out there for you, but you'll see the price creep up pretty quickly. For example, nearly all brands will have a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8. This is a gold standard lens for action photography because of the very wide aperture throughout the zoom range. But you may find a lens like this Panasonic 70 to 200 f4. Raymond and I own this lens, and it provides stellar image quality. Not quite as wide an aperture, but it is quite a bit less expensive than its f2.8 counterpart. There are lenses called super telephoto lenses that move beyond 200 millimeters, like 100 to 400 or 200 to 600 millimeters. You gain quite a bit of reach. You can zoom in a ton, but these lenses are not only expensive, they are large and heavy. I use lenses like this all of the time. I love them, but I want to make sure that you understand what you're getting into with them. Those are my recommendations for which lens to purchase after your initial kit, but let's go check in with Raymond at the pool.
Hey Raymond, we have a question for you. What is your top advice for someone who has their first camera and kit lens? Like, what should they purchase next, or at least what should they think about when they're choosing their next lens?
Good question. The temptation is to spend. Each of the manufacturers has top new lenses available at top prices. But the wonderful thing about the different kinds of cameras that we discussed in this series is, for the most part, they can all accept older lenses as well. In fact, the lens purchases that Leigh and I look at and contemplate the most aren't the latest and greatest lenses. There's a time for that, but recently we picked up the old manual focus Nikon 50 millimeter f1.2. It works on our Nikon F mounts, but it also can be adapted to all of the mirrorless cameras that we have. It's a manual focus lens. It's not stellar sharp like all the latest and greatest lenses. It does open up to f1.2, which is great in low light, and it has its own character and personality, especially when it comes to those wide aperture images at f1.2 and f1.4. some of the newer lenses I think are almost too perfect, and they can be many, many times the price of older lenses. Another one we have our eye on is the 35mm f1.4 manual focus Nikon AIS. The 35mm focal length for a prime is great for walking around, and again, it opens to f1.4, but it's manual focus, and it'll work on every camera that we have. The temptation is to pay a lot of money for those latest lenses, but when it comes to skill, that doesn't cost you money. You can work with an older lens, you can work with a newer lens if that's your thing, and you're going to develop your skills just the same. In fact, some of those older lenses with manual focus can be a little more challenging. So as you're learning and as you're focusing, you're developing skills potentially more quickly. And again, those old lenses have character and personality, and that can bring a little bit of spark to your images as well.
That's a good point. Using a manual focus lens can be another challenge for you in your journey, especially if you have been using the camera's smarts and allowing it to choose where the focus is within the frame. You choosing where you want to focus and then manually achieving focus there can help you in the future. I go into this a lot more in the Basics of Photography course, but sometimes if you're allowing your camera to choose where focus is, you don't like where it focused. If you know how to manually focus, you can take over and capture the photo that you envision. Before I go, there is no one right lens for anything. I've never said, man, if only I had that one very specific lens, I'd be able to do that type of photography. There are certainly lenses that I would like to have, and some would certainly help me and change my results. I've been a photographer for a long time. I know exactly what I need and what I want. Right now, I'm downright lusting after the new Nikon 400mm f2.8 lens for Z-mount, but that beauty isn't in the budget right now. And not having that lens didn't stop me from going out to capture wonderful images of this bald eagle with one of my own telephoto lenses. My point is, keep an open mind. Your skills as a photographer and your knowledge of using your gear is far more important than the precise lens that you have. If you're vacillating between 2 or 3 lenses as the next piece of your collection, it may be best to simply choose one and take the plunge. Especially at the beginning of your photography journey, it is gaining experience with your current gear in varying situations and then exploring new gear like different lenses that will help you truly understand what it is that you like and want in your gear. I could talk on and on about choosing lenses. There are so many considerations and so many lenses out there, but I'm going to end this video here. If you are watching and you have other suggestions for everyone, let us know in the comments. We all like something a little bit different, so your thoughts may help someone else. Thank you to KEH for continuing to support this channel. Remember, there are affiliate links and codes in the description of this video, along with links to my courses if you want to learn more about photography. And thank you for watching.
Hi, yeah. I love you. I love you.